Yo, it's Goldwings42, and I'm back with another Podfic video. Yes, I know this is rather quick, but I mean, it's better than another 2 month gap, so yeah. Today, I'm going to be reading Chapter 4 of Learning How to Live Again Am I Truly Worth It? By Nstlgia on AO3. And let's get into the notes. Trigger warning, child abuse, school work will be kicking my ass for the next 2 weeks, so I'm actually glad I got inspired to finish this. Hope you like. And those are her notes. So, yeah, let's get right into the fic today. Ignoring problems should be Izuku's quirk or something. It was too easy for him to pretend like a pro hero didn't just warn him about digging into his personal life just to get him off the streets, or that a detective with a literal lie detecting quirk didn't just stop by and try to unravel the lies Izuku had crafted to survive the past few weeks. Nah, instead of worrying about that, he went grocery shopping. He got his first check from Kamara recently, and it was a decent amount for the hours he worked each week. He honestly didn't want to spend it this early, but food was kind of a necessity. And well, after the hell that was last month, he wanted to treat himself to some actual meals. Sue him. He strolled through the aisles aimlessly, ignoring some of the weird looks he got that he told his mind had nothing to do with his quirk status. They literally can't tell what quirk you have, Izuku. Relax. And probably everything to do with a teenager grocery shopping alone on a weekend. Yeah, he didn't really think that through, but it's not like kids don't shop alone sometimes. It isn't that weird. Izuku had grabbed rice, miso, and soup stock, seaweed, and he planned to get eggs as well. The last thing he had trouble deciding to get was salmon. Izuku wasn't a cook, but he had been learning some dishes recently, especially ever since his mom expected dinner to be made for her when she got home every night. He grabbed it impulsively to counteract his tentative thoughts. As he was strolling out of the aisle, his cart hit someone else's as they were turning the corner. Izuku flinched at the clash it made, and he immediately spat out apologies. So sorry about that, he mumbled, pulling his cart back so the other person could move freely. When he looked up to see who he actually hit, all he saw was blonde. Then President Mike's face beamed became the focal point of his attention. Hey, listener, no harm done. Hey, Izuku stumbled over his words, not knowing his civilian name, but also not wanting to out him in the middle of a grocery store. So he lives around here? That's the second pro hero he's found in this area. President Mike smiled kindly. You can call me Yamada when I'm not on the job. Izuku nodded, his eyes straying over to the man's cart, noticing just how many things he was buying. Surely that wasn't all for one person? Did he live with a partner? Thinking that was the end of the interaction, Izuku was about to move away from him. However, the hero just beamed and waved a hand. You know coffee, right? My husband is awfully picky about his. Can you help me choose a blend? Stuck on the word husband and the fact that President Mike Yamada still wanted him around, he didn't follow right away. When the man was getting further away, Izuku hurried to follow, convinced he had heard him wrong until Yamada turned to give him a pointed look. This was strange. Definitely not how he saw his Saturday going, and now that he was hyper aware of everything, he was embarrassed by his less than put together outfit, sweatpants and a hoodie that said t-shirt across the front. Meanwhile, Yamada, though in civilian clothes, still looked very professional and captured attention everywhere he went. He was very deliberate in every action he took, even when deciding what coffee brand to choose. He considered each one with careful eyes. He finally turned to Izuku, an inquisitive look still on his face. What do you think? Yamada let him know that his husband took his coffee black most of the time, but occasionally he would enjoy it sweet. Izuku felt like he was cosplaying a coffee expert. He honestly asked Shinsou for help a lot of the time when he was working, but he wouldn't tell Yamada that. It felt nice to be useful in a sense. Maybe this? Izuku picked up a medium roast blend from a brand he recognized. Perhaps the cafe used it. He wasn't sure. Let me see, Yamada said before grabbing the coffee, and he placed it in the cart. I haven't bought this kind yet. This might just be the one. Izuku could feel himself sweating under the pressure. Maybe he'd never run into him again. Again, he thought this was the end of the interaction. Again, he was wrong. Somehow, Yamada had roped Izuku into the rest of grocery shopping. The weirdest part? He asked Izuku about his opinion on things as if they genuinely mattered. Izuku didn't think he'd been here for so long. He was getting tired, but he didn't want Yamada to think he wanted to leave. He really didn't. Spending the day with one of his favorite pro heroes was, well, a dream come true. A dream that he had given up on soon after meeting All Might. Thinking about this had him zoned out. He didn't hear Yamada's voice calling his name until the man put a hand on his shoulder. Not expecting it, he flinched backwards, eyes wide. Yamada looked shocked and slightly concerned, and he put his hand back at his side. Midoriya, you alright? Izuku shook himself out of it and forced a small smile. I'm okay. Sorry, what did you say? I said we should probably go check out now. I realize how much time I've taken from you. He waved his hands in front of his face. No worries, really. I had fun. They walked to the checkout together, Yamada going first. Once his stuff was paid for and bagged, which took a while because of the amount of things he had, he waved Izuku with a bright smile. Bye-bye. Izuku managed to smile for real this time. Yamada's smile was too bright not to return. Bye, Yamada-san. Once the man was out of sight, it was like the weight returned to his shoulders tenfold. Grocery shopping with Yamada, as small and insignificant as an action it seemed, was probably the best thing to happen to him in a while. Izuku paid the cashier and left, the bags feeling heavier than they should have been. When he was walking up to the steps to the apartment, the door was slightly open. He froze, panic overtaking him. He knew he had locked that door, but did someone break in? But why? He didn't have anything of value. Bracing himself, Izuku pushed the door open. His jaw dropped when he recognized the woman standing in the middle of the living room, as if waiting for him. Mom? Well, why are you here? She looked livid. She stumped forward and grabbed his wrist in a tight grip, making him drop the shopping bag that was in his hand. Why are the police calling me, Izuku? What did you say to them? She let out, her chest rising and falling harshly. Izuku hesitated, the conversation with Tsukauchi coming back to him. Because he didn't answer right away, his mother's grip on his wrist tightened, and he flinched. I didn't tell them anything, I swear. The police came by asking for your number, and I gave it to them. I didn't know what they wanted to do. I'm sorry. He was cut off by a feeling of a sharp sting in his left cheek. His head turned to the side because of the impact. It wasn't the first time she'd laid a hand on him, but it didn't hurt any less. Inko was speaking, but he couldn't hear her over the ringing in his ears. It's funny how much of a dip his day had taken with such a simple interaction. Izuku, she demanded, and he quickly snapped out of it. Did you hear me? Were you listening? Izuku wished he were now. She would get even angrier with his response. He shook his head, but thankfully, Inko didn't hit him again. We have to go to the police station today, together, so get ready. The news filled him with dread, but he hurried to get dressed appropriately. He left groceries on the floor next to the couch. Izuku chose a simple shirt with comfortable pants, and he grabbed a zip up to cover his arms. It wasn't terribly cold, but there was still a breeze that justified his choice. After that was done, he went back out to the foyer to put his shoes on. Inko was already waiting by the door, her arms crossed over her chest, impatiently. He could tell without looking in a mirror that the left side of his face was bright red, but he could explain that away with the exertion of walking all the way to the police station. Izuku just hoped that no one would look too close enough to recognize the hand-shaped blotch on his cheek. They eventually made it, and Izuku was getting more panicked the closer they got to the station. Inko strode right up to the front desk, plastering on the facade she used when talking to strangers. Hello, I'm Midoriya Inko, and I'm here with my son, Midoriya Izuku. We were told to come by into the station sometime this afternoon. The one behind the desk nodded her head, typing some things on the computer in front of her, then said, Just take the seat over there, and Detective Tsukauchi will be with you shortly. Inko thanked her, and they both sat down on plastic chairs lined beside the entrance to the building. Izuku was a bundle of nerves. He had foolishly hoped that Tsukauchi wouldn't be the one questioning them. He would have to be careful then, more careful than ever. Izuku hadn't asked Tsukauchi how his quirk worked as Shadow, mostly because when he did, the man simply never humored him. So he made up his own assumptions. Technically, Tsukauchi's quirk didn't detect universal truths and lies, only what the person accused on believed to be true or false. If a person committed a crime, it would be hard, maybe even impossible, to make themselves believe that they didn't do it since they were consciously exerted that decision. It got a little muddier when the person would have been asked about their moral stance and what a crime was if they thought it was true justice to be prosecuted. Now, Izuku was stuck on half-truths and how that would come up for Tsukauchi. Would his quirk detect it as a lie, or detect it at anything at all? He wondered if his quirk gave Tsukauchi an innate feeling that the man interpreted as a truth or lie that he had to learn over time to perfect, or if his quirk literally just popped up the words truth or lie in front of him as soon as the person spoke. Honestly, Izuku understood why Tsukauchi never answered these questions. If the general population knew, they would find ways to counteract his quirk effectively. With all that being said, Izuku had no idea how to go about this. From the nature of the call, he was sure that Mitsuki made Tsukauchi would probably focus on the maternal abuse. Could Izuku really convince himself to believe that Inko didn't abuse or neglect him? He wasn't sure. A lot of the time, he thought he deserved it. Inko was dealing with too much, and with a quirkless kid on top of that, yeah, he could understand. But was that different than believing it was abuse in the first place? He thought this over for what seemed a long time before Tsukauchi came out of presumably his office and walked over to the two of them. Inko stood immediately, a nervous smile on her face. "Detective! Hi," she said sweetly, sticking her hand out to shake his. Tsukauchi had a quizzical look in his eyes, but he shook her hand nonetheless. Izuku stood, standing slightly behind his mother. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of big misunderstanding? Was the call even about me? I mean, people rarely come to visit me in Izuku. There's no possible way that anyone could make such snap judgments on our house, you know?" Tsukauchi looked like he was about to respond when Inko gasped dramatically, her hand covering her mouth, feigning concern. "Or you don't think it's..." She lowered her voice, leaning in towards Tsukauchi like they were sharing a secret. "Because he's quirkless, do you?" And there it was. Izuku didn't actually know if Mitsuki mentioned that to Tsukauchi, but if she didn't, he knew now. And it was draining to physically watch as Tsukauchi's posture straightened and eyes hardened when gazing down at Inko. It was good for him, he guessed, that this would easily be forgotten because of Izuku's quirk status. But all the same, he thought maybe his quirk wouldn't matter this time. How naive. Instead of dismissing them, though, he said, "I'm afraid there's no misunderstanding, Midoriya-san. The call was strictly about you and your son. Because of the nature of this call, I would have to ask you some questions." Izuku was shocked. He didn't expect the detective to continue with the investigation. Inko's expression fell a fraction of a second before she forced another smile. "Okay, no problem." It was clearly a problem, and Izuku could see the small twitch of Tsukauchi's eyebrow that probably told him that statement was a lie. Izuku let out a quiet sigh as he followed them into a room that looked like a stereotypical interrogation room from the movies and crime TV shows. He and Inko sat on one side, Tsukauchi on the other. The man took out a notepad and pen, and he relaxed back against the chair. "Must be nice." Meanwhile, Izuku was feeling sick with nerves. He didn't know what Tsukauchi was going to ask, what it would reveal, most importantly, what would happen if Tsukauchi decided Inko wasn't fit to be a mother. "So, to begin, I need to make it clear to you my quirk. I call it lie detector, and it's basically how it works. Whenever you answer a question of mine, I can tell whether or not you are telling the truth," Tsukauchi said. Izuku could see Inko tense, her features freezing in pace. Izuku would find it funny if it were any other situation. "Why, how apt of a quirk for a detective," Inko commented, rolling her shoulders back to exude the confidence she probably didn't have. Tsukauchi smiled small at her adversation. "Quite. Additionally, I'm going to ask you some questions regarding your home life." The caller wanted to remain anonymous. They were concerned about your sons. "Izuku, may I call you that?" And Izuku nodded. He continued, "Well, to begin, they think you're, being neglectful and have left him alone." Inko looked confused. "Well, detective, I am a nurse. My work hours are very unpredictable sometimes, so he will be left alone for hours at a time, and it's never been an issue before. I mean, he's 13 now, almost 14. That's not too young to be left alone. Plus, for most of the day, he's at school. Shit, he forgot to tell her that he moved to online school. Well, unless Mitsuki told Tsukauchi that, he was sure he didn't know, and wouldn't know about it. I see. Tsukauchi wrote down some things in his notepad. I guess I should be more blunt then. Have you been neglecting Izuku? Giving him less than what he needs? Izuku looked over at his mother, wondering how she would respond. But Inko didn't hesitate. Of course not. I've given him everything he deserves. A big difference between what Inko thought he deserved and what he needed. Inko must truly believe herself then, because Tsukauchi didn't waver. More scribbling, then Tsukauchi turned towards him, expression softened. Izuku, I want to ask you a couple questions now, okay? But before I do you want to do this alone? Your mother doesn't have to be in the room. At that, Inko looked indignant. Why would I need to leave the room? She asked, her voice slightly shrill. Tsukauchi sighed. It's protocol. If a child is in a potentially abusive situation, then they might not feel comfortable talking with their parent in the room. Inko didn't look happy about it, but she didn't say anything. But he knew she would get even more upset if he decided to talk to Tsukauchi alone. Izuku kept his gaze on the slap as he said, She can stay. There was a pause, and the only sound of a pen and paper filled the room. That's fine. Do you feel safe at home, Izuku? He hesitated, which was probably a bad sign. Then he said, yes, because Inko doesn't live there anymore. Tsukauchi nodded. Has she hurt you in any way? Physically? Emotionally? Izuku tensed at the question. He wasn't sure if there was a way around this one. Thankfully, or not, he wasn't sure yet. Inko gave him time to think about this. When she stood up from her chair, How dare you! I would never do such a thing. Do you understand how hard it is to raise a child as a single mother? Do you have any children, detective? And she went on and on, talking about how raising a quirkless child was harder than normal ones, and how her methods were probably different than another parent's. It was jarring to listen to. His head was lowered, his hands covering his ears. Suddenly, he could hear someone calling his name. He stood up, almost as abruptly as Inko did, causing them both to look shocked. Can I, where's the bathroom? Izuku stuttered. He could feel mild panic attack coming on. Tsukauchi blinked, confused and slightly concerned. Turn left out of the room, down the hall, first door on your right? Thanks, he whispered, speed walking out of the room. Izuku followed the detective's directions and quickly stepped inside, hoping he was alone. His breaths were coming fast. He walked over to one of the sinks, turning it on and splashing his face with water. Izuku forced himself to take deep breaths and eventually calm down. Izuku looked into the bathroom mirror and turned his head slightly to see if his cheek was still red. It wasn't. It was like the hit never happened. After a few moments, he collected himself and walked out of the bathroom. He had his head down, so he didn't see when someone rounded a corner and he bumped into them. For the second time that day, he quickly apologized to whoever he ran into. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention, he said, and quickly tried to walk away. But the voice stopped him in his tracks. I didn't think I would see you here. Izuku turned around, his eyes wide. Eraserhead. Damn it, of course. He hadn't seen him since the ramen shop, and seeing him here as Izuku, the civilian, was disorienting. Oh, hey. Izuku coughed into his fist, not really knowing what to say. Why are you here? Izuku didn't really want to answer that. Oh, I was caught selling illicit drugs. The usual. If you were caught selling illicit drugs, you wouldn't be here. Eraser deadpanned, already over it. Izuku pulled one shoulder up in a shrug. That's what you think. Tsukauchi was probably wondering where he had gone by now, so he had to get back, but he needed to know. So, did you keep the kitten? Eraser nodded into his capture weapon. I did. I named her Eclipse. The cat they found was a black cat, so kind of basic, but otherwise a cute name. And he didn't miss the we. Oh, cool. Izuku didn't know what else to say. It was nice that Eraser took her in, so he knew the kitten was in good hands. When neither said anything else, Izuku took a step back. Well, good seeing you again. Bye, he said, and turned to leave before Eraserhead could say anything else. It was a bit hard to separate this Eraserhead from the one that told him he would go after Izuku's identities and to stop him from patrolling. The resentment was still there, even if he sort of understood where the hero was coming from. When he opened the door to his room, the energy was still tense. Inko hadn't sat back down, and it seemed like she might have reanimated, reamed out the detect, reamed out the detective a second time since he had left. She turned sharply towards Izuku when he entered the room. "Come on, Izuku, we're leaving." Inko walked towards him, grabbing his arm to lead him out. Izuku glanced toward Tsukauchi, confused. The man sighed. "Technically, Izuku, you don't have to answer my questions. That's your right. I asked Midoriya-san the questions I needed to," Tsuki explained. Izuku was still confused. Was that really it? He guessed they didn't have enough evidence to do anything. Izuku could say something, but honestly, he didn't want to. Inky wasn't in the house anymore, and she was supposed to be leaving him alone. If they arrested her, his life would be turned upside down. He was fine with how things were going right now. Plus, Izuku was still concerned about moving to a different apartment. Something smaller. So it was not like they would bother him in the future. "Oh, thanks for your time," Izuku said awkwardly, and before Tsukauchi could reply, Inko was pulling him out of the room. Her grip was getting tighter as they walked. They even passed Eraserhead, who was standing outside Tsukauchi's office. The two of them locked eyes for a second until Inko had pulled him out of the station completely. Inko didn't let him go until they were out of the police station. The walk back to the apartment was silent. When they finally got back, Inko sat at the door. She looked at him with cold eyes. "Don't let this happen again," she said, as if it was his fault. Izuku took a stuttered breath, clenching his fists. "I won't." Inko nodded once, then she left, slamming the door behind her as she did. Izuku let out a breath, then turned into a sob, and he sat on the floor next to the groceries that he had left by the couch. He ran his hands through his hair, tugging on it harshly. How could she kill his confidence so easily? It wasn't always like this. Before he was diagnosed quirkless, and even a little bit afterwards, they were so close. It honestly didn't hurt as much as when his father left, because he barely talked to him in the first place. But his mother? She was always there for him. She was the first one to believe that he could be a hero, that he could make a positive change in the world. How could he have messed it up so badly? Izuku sat there for who knows how long before he decided the groceries needed to be put away. He did that, busying himself. He didn't notice how badly his hands were shaking until he dropped one of the packages of food on the floor. He blew out a breath, picking it up and putting it away. Once he was finished, he curled up on the couch and passed out. Izuku woke up later, feeling reinvigorated. He felt like training for the first time in a while. Not exactly patrolling again, but he had been slacking. His vigilante phone was in his room. He kept it in there after the first couple of days of constant buzzing and text from who he assumed was Eraserhead, maybe Tsukauchi. Now it should have calmed down. He was in the right, well, not right, but a better mindset now, so he wanted to check them. Izuku pushed the door open to his room and grabbed the phone that was sitting on his right hand. He opened it, and his jaw dropped at the number of unread messages. Close to 100? What the hell? He opened the messages, seeing the majority were from Eraserhead, as he guessed, and only a few from Tsukauchi. Eraserhead's messages were frantic the first couple of days that Izuku didn't answer. It was basically asking him about his whereabouts, if he was okay, and that he didn't mean to come on so strongly. After a week, he managed to limit it to one message per night. Each night, Izuku didn't show up for patrol. He would send a check-in message. There was even one from yesterday night. He hadn't stopped messaging every day. What the hell? There were not any messages that blamed him either. All were asking about his well-being. Izuku wasn't sure how he felt about that. The runs from Tsukauchi were mostly the same. There was one message about what Eraserhead told him. "Shadow, just letting you know, I won't approve Eraserhead's request unless you were in a position of hurting yourself or others, or, actually committed a crime." That reassured him, honestly. He initially thought Tsukauchi would easily go along with Eraserhead's whims. He guessed getting hurt during patrol didn't count for hurting himself, as long as they thought it wasn't deliberate. Izuku held the phone in his hands for a long time. He didn't know if she should reply or not, at least not yet. It further convinced him to get back into training so he could go back out there, maybe reconcile with Eraserhead, but that was a stretch. He put on his vigilante suit and climbed out the window, making his way down to dig up a beach. Izuku cleared some more trash, and then he did his usual workouts. It took him a little bit to get the rhythm back, but he got there. It was getting dark, and Izuku really contemplated getting back to patrolling, but he decided not yet. He wasn't ready for that yet. The next day, he did a little research and he ended up with a new vigilante name, something he actually thought sounded good. Then he did some research about making different gears and tools. Once he had a mock-up of what he wanted to build, he journeyed back to Dagobah Beach. He had limited resources, so he would have to make do with what he had. Izuku had an old belt he wanted to utilize, and some old patches he could sew on, so it could maybe carry extra items with him that he needed. Izuku also found a knife strap holder thingy he could tie around his thigh for easy access. After that, he tested everything to make sure it could withstand his erratic ways. It was good enough for now. Unfortunately, he did not have the resources to try his hand at making a capture weapon. Maybe some other time. It took a few nights, but he felt better and ready to go back on patrol. He was still getting texts every night from Racer, and he decided to reply this time. Meet at regular rooftop. He didn't know if Eraserhead was still bothered to check there before his shift started, so he had to be sure. Like usual, Izuku didn't check for a response, and he was off. Izuku just hoped this conversation didn't go as disastrously as the last one. And that's the end of the chapter. We got some endnotes here, so here they are. Sorry, I honestly got too lazy to write the conversation, so that'll be next chapter. So don't hate me if I completely butcher the police investigation in my mind. Tsukauchi was just waiting for some more solid evidence than just a phone call to go after Inko. He notices the uncomfortableness from Izuku and wants to help. He also knows how unwilling the police department is with actually helping quirkless people and victims. Secondly, Uzi is how I'm spelling the short form of usual because I don't know an actual Kudu to spell it. Well, Ushi looks incorrect, and I think it's more of a Z sound anyways. How would you spell it? And that's the end of the chapter notes. So, thank you for listening. As always, do the things, like, comment, subscribe maybe? I know, cheesy YouTuber call to action, whatever. Drink water, eat food, get sleep, the things, take care of yourself, and peace out.